meeting, the commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for legal advice and discussion with the city's attorneys for legal advice on any item listed on the following agenda pursuant to ARS subsection 38-431.03A3. Item number 2 on the agenda is roll call, and I will turn it over to you, Adriana, to do roll call, please.
Sounds great. Kevin Bont. Eric Brownfield.
Here.
Tyler Denham. Kevin Dobie. Karen Flores. Here. Sandy Flores. Jackie Kellogg.
Here.
Savannah McLaughlin.
Here.
Moses Milazzo.
Here.
Corey Rummy. Ross Schaefer. Glenn Slivers. Haley Zoroya. Back to you, Chair.
Awesome, thank you. Item number 3 is the land acknowledgement. Do we have any volunteer commissioners who would like to read the land acknowledgement?
I can read it.
Thank you, Karen.
The Housing Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands in this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you very much. Item number 4 is public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within their jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission on that day. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during this portion of the agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time the item is heard. Adriana, do we have anyone for public comment?
I don't have anybody. I do see that there's maybe potential public speakers. I don't know if Councilmember House. Nope.
No? Okay. Seeing no public comments, then we'll move on to item number 5, which is approval of the minutes. And we are looking for consideration and approval of minutes for the Housing Commission meeting held on May 23rd, 2024. We can approve the minutes from the May 2024 Housing Commission meeting as an action. So I'm looking for a motion and or discussion. All right, seeing no discussion. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Awesome, thank you. Commissioner Kellogg, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Is that you, Karen? Close? Okay, thank you. And seconded by Commissioner Flores. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Excellent, thank you. The minutes have passed and are approved. Item number 6 on our agenda is action and discussion items, and there are no items listed under this agenda item. So we'll move on to item 7, which is general business. Item 7A is an overview of the city's affordable housing incentives and affordable home sales for information only. And I believe I'm going to turn that over to staff members to do a presentation. Is that right, Adriana?
Yes.
Awesome.
We can share.
No, we're good.
We have a presentation. We're gonna share the screen.
And we're gonna have staff present from the table partially because when we stand up front, the camera captures like our heads and nobody can see the rest of you. And so we're trying to switch up a little bit.
So I'll kick this off. Oh.
Go win. Okay. Yeah. Go window, not screen. Yep.
Okay. And you have a clicker or you need. You are a clicker. Okay, I will, start the presentation. This is, like Adriana, or I believe it might have been in the agenda packet. This was a fair item on the future agenda item request from the commission received a while back. And we are breaking the topic into two, parts. And I'll be reviewing, the incentive policy that helps us get affordable unit and what that development, what the development process looks like, as we're speaking with developers to try to work toward these affordable units, and then on the long run, and then Marissa will give an overview of our, once those units are built, the sales process. That the city follows to get affordable home ownership unit sold. So we have an agenda just to kind of, so you can guys. Next slide. We do have an agenda broken out into like a handful of topics, so you can kind of see what we're working through.
Keep talking.
And, okay. Then, so first off, I will start with, an overview of what inclusionary housing is, Arizona state law, what that has to say about it. Then I'll get into the affordable housing incentive policy that we have at the city and how that is woven into the development process. And then we can get into the affordable sales process. And we were thinking it would just be kind of an open time for questions and comments afterwards, so we can ensure whoever requested the item originally can bring forward if there were follow-up questions. So, so with this, we're next slide. I just wanted to start with this concept of affordable housing in the state of Arizona. I don't know how often people are familiar with these terms, inclusionary housing or our state statutes, but as of 2016, Arizona state statutes prohibited municipalities from mandating affordable housing in new residential development. But the law does allow municipalities to incentivize affordable housing, which the city had already been doing for years prior to this statute. So yeah, it was confirmation that we can continue to incentivize the creation of affordable housing. And so these affordable housing mandates nationally around the country, you will hear about inclusionary housing programs or inclusionary zoning. You might also hear inclusionary zoning requirements that do exist around the country. This graphic I thought was really helpful if anybody is kind of more of a visual person. It's kind of helpful to see the depiction of the before and after benefit of inclusionary housing policies applied to a hypothetical like apartment rental building. You would have a lot of these inclusionary housing programs. They offer incentives to help offset the cost of providing affordable units. Everybody knows, even if they're required, that there are costs associated with bringing these units to market. So they'll offer typical incentives. A typical incentive would be like a density bonus. And so this example shows a 14% density bonus being applied. So there were originally going to be 58 market rate units and no affordable units. With an inclusionary housing policy applied, you would end up with a minimum 10% affordable units. That's a pretty big standard nationally. With the 10% affordable unit requirement plus the density bonus applied, you would now have 6 affordable units and 60 market rate units So that's just an example of a very common density bonus in exchange for affordable units in a rental project. So again, while we cannot mandate affordable housing in our state, we can incentivize it with tools like the incentive policy that I'm going to get into in a second. So our incentive policy for affordable housing, we also call it IPA. The IPA is our incentive. The IPA is our incentive tool that we use to encourage the creation of affordable units when we can't require it. Next slide. I just wanted to give a brief, this is an extremely simplified overview of what I would call the development, the pre-development process, like the planning process that a developer goes through with the city. I thought it was most helpful for the purposes for today to start to break it down in these 5 blocks. How we do it here at the city is we offer a free pre-application meeting with city staff for a developer to come in, let them propose their rough idea of what they want to do, and kind of we assemble a team of city staff from several departments to assess this very conceptual idea and give them some heads up about, oh, this parcel has some, floodplain issues, you're going to have to worry about stormwater detention, all that kind of stuff. So that pre-app meeting is just a good kind of introductory opportunity for the developer to really learn about our code. At that meeting, it's very common that I will attend those, especially obviously if they're a residential project. I'll sit in and I'll make sure they're aware that we do have an incentive policy. And depending on what they're proposing, how it might be useful to them, I kind of hook them up with the materials for them to review. They're usually kind of overwhelmed at the time. We're throwing a lot of codes at them. And so I package things for them to have as a resource as they proceed into the development review process with future applications. So that's why I want this education on available incentives is like this next block where I can set up a meeting with them to explain that what is this, how does it work, when do these incentives get applied, and that leads into their formal development application submittals, whether it's a rezoning application they have to do, or just if they have their entitlements, they have a piece of land that's entitled, they're just bringing forward a site plan for review, where the city is applying all of our codes to their development. So yes, these this concept of us coordinating with developers, trying to arrive at some deal points, this discussion period, I kind of call it, it's kind of this blob of coordination that we have going back and forth throughout these kind of central kind of phases of the development process, just trying to figure out how to keep moving things forward, figure out what's advantageous to them. I would say that I've noticed that a lot of the times developers, they know we have the incentives early on, but they're not quite sure what would be most helpful to them until they're looking at their site and where they can see where they might get relief from certain things, or and I want to get into what those incentives actually are to kind of help the site. So after the review process with the city, the developer has a site plan that is meeting all the codes, it's approved. And they have, let's say they have agreed to contribute 10% affordable units, which is our minimum requirement. We would need to secure that commitment in a legally binding document that it's written down somewhere. They sign it, the city finds it, and it says, the developer is agreeing to contribute X number of units at this AMI for this period of time. So those requirements are always put into legal documents. I would call them generally development agreements.
It's me.
Okay.
I was worried things were going in and out, so I did a sound check.
No, okay, thank you. Keep going. Yeah, so we have these, we've called them development agreements, usually associated with rezoning cases, much larger kind of They capture other public improvements that are required from that development, all the way down to much smaller agreements. We just call them affordable housing agreements, for lack of a better term, just so that it is a binding document that is recorded and associated with that property. And it actually, we say if the developer were to sell that property, but that affordable commitment remains with the land. So they don't get to just sell and no longer have that obligation associated with that project. So that really does take up a huge bulk of my Jess's time, coordinating with the planning department and legal on these agreements, and getting things to a place where the developer is happy with what they're able to come up with, and we're happy, and the codes are being met and all that. So, and then of course, the last stop on any of these developments is the council approval. Unless it's an entitled project and we just have the affordable housing agreement recorded.
But I think the important part that Jen is being super kind about, leaving out, is that there's attorneys involved on both sides all the way through. And that quite often slows down as language is discussed back and forth, et cetera. And so there are things that we can move along and we would love it to look just like this, but there's do loops within that things go back and forth, et cetera. So we love legal support because it keeps us out of trouble. At the same time, sometimes we're like, just tell us what you want to say, and we'll go in that direction. So,
and that also leads me to this concept of flexibility. Like, how flexible do you want these agreements to be? Because you can't predict the future. We're at the part where, you know, they just have a drawing on paper that looks good that we approved. They are not building it yet. If they are not at that point where a, you know, subdivision has the road through it and they're building vertical house. So many years go in between creation of these legal agreements and the actual creation of units. We might kind of touch on that later. That we're trying to balance this idea of we want to allow for some flexibility about the unknown future market conditions, but we also are needing to hold them to a certain affordability standard. So when changes are required of these agreements, they take a while, and they require council approval. So we can't just go changing these things administratively. Our job would be much easier if we could just say, let's just change that, you know, let's change this price or change this AMI. Anyway, so that's kind of this other element of how much flexibility are we working into these documents. Good. We have a history slide next. A history of our incentives, really condensed into just a few bars here. But I think this is the simplest way to kind of get it kind of cemented for you guys. So the very first incentive policy was created in about 1997, 98, was adopted in 99. It was called the Set Aside Policy. It was a standalone document that offered regulatory and procedural incentives on a smaller scale than what we currently have right now. So it was like a good starter doc. It resulted in the Real Homes permanently affordable units. Real Homes was the only project to use that set aside policy. But we were able to get those first permanently affordable homes out of it. So it was a great tool for, you know, what we were trying to do at the time. I do want to mention before we get too far along, we have had other affordable ownership units built in the community prior to these formal incentive policies. They existed, they were kind of one off. They were mostly built by smaller nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity and Both Hands, which was the older version of Housing Solutions in Northern Arizona. A majority of them, if not all, were more like one-time affordable. They didn't have these permanent affordable restrictions tied to the unit itself. So we can kind of call that one-time affordable. So it was really helpful for the initial family growing in, but there was nothing restricting this future sale of that property to or sale price or to another eligible buyer. So those units are out there. I believe there are still the original buyers, homeowners in a lot of them. So they served the purpose. I think it was a lot more in the 90s.
In the 2000s, prior to it being adopted in 2009, both Housing Solutions, Affordable Housing Coalition, both hands, Housing Solutions, same organization, and Habitat for Humanity were building under a one-time affordability model where the difference between the construction price and the appraised valuation at sale was recorded as a second on the property, with the intent that that would be enough money to help a subsequent buyer get into that situation. Unfortunately, in a community like ours where home prices go up so quickly, we were finding that that's not enough investment, and we were having to add to investment and add to investment to get the same exact type of household based on income level into the exact same unit. So we were re-subsidizing or increasing the subsidy in each of those units with diminishing returns over time. And so that was when we started looking at permanent affordability. The first one in the homes was done with deed restrictions, and then looking at land trust as deed restrictions fell out in favor of the lenders. We try to respond to what the market wants and needs, but sometimes the market doesn't always tell us until they're like, well, we're not going to do that. So that was really, we didn't have an advent. Land trust was created in 2006, 2005. With the first units realized shortly after that, but not using incentives. So then the IPA in 2009. And we do still have original homeowners in a number of those units.
So this kind of moving into that second bullet, the years of the housing boom, like in those early 2000s, we saw the dramatic increases in housing costs. During this time, we had the 2005 Community Housing Policy Task Force, the 2006 Comprehensive Plan, and the 2008 Nexus Study, which they were all city or community studies and plans. And they all put forth recommendations and strategies for the development and preservation of affordable housing. So everybody kind of coming together saying, hey, this is what is needed. So after council considered all of these various community-backed recommendations, they did direct staff to incorporate a lot of those findings into a kind of comprehensive affordable housing incentive policy. That was about 2008. And in 2009, the incentive IPA was adopted. So it really was informed by those prior planning documents and studies. And the timing though of the IPA wasn't ideal. It did precede an extensive rewrite of our Flagstaff zoning code, which took several years to develop and complete and finalize. And it was adopted by council in 2011, so just 2 years shy of the IPA being adopted yet this new zoning code. The IPA also predates our current Flagstaff regional plan, which was developed again over several years. It takes a while to get that put together. It was ratified by voters in 2014, right after I started the city. So, yeah, the very significant community policy regulatory documents being created post IPA. And so essentially it just means we have this document that's referencing older documents. It really just kind of takes us to where we are now. In the last several years, we have had a lot of success with affordable housing commitments and development, a new interest out of the recession. Development really seemed to pick up in these last few years that I've been working on this. But it really has allowed us to see where the incentive policy is working and where it's not working, what's kind of the hindrance. So it's where we're now, we're at the point where we're able to be working with a consultant in the last cap project. I believe you guys clear remember that, or we're all part of that presentation that Michelle McNulty came with us a couple months ago. That last cap process has been several years in the making. It was identified in our 10-year housing plan to coordinate with the consultant to take a look at all of our codes, take a look at our incentives, identify what are the issues, how can we streamline, what's more attractive to developers, how can we make the code just function better in general. And so a result of that collaboration, a lot of work, it'll take a long time, of course, but a result would be new incentive concepts. And it's really exciting because we're just about to get into that kind of work this summer with the consultants where they're going to start posing new incentive and code concepts with the city to ensure that we're on board before any kind of final recommendations are made. So, yeah, I mean, redoing the IPA has been on the to-do list for several years. It's just figuring out the best way to do it with the right partners. It just became kind of snowballed into such a big project because so many code issues were entangled. So,
And what we figured out as well, and why we asked for money to do the code analysis projects with the incentive analysis included, is that different incentives for different things were put into the codes for sustainability, for economic development, without a comprehensive consideration of how those incentives might work together or against each other, et cetera. And every time we started down that road, Jen did a great job of gathering community input on the housing incentive ones. And every time we started down that road, it grew and grew and grew. Well, if we're gonna look at these, then we need to look at these, and we need to look at these. And we realized what we really needed was a third party to come in and do the analysis. So it wasn't any of us at the table. We're all at the table together, but there is nobody with a louder voice because it's the third party doing the analysis and is able to look at how those incentives might work well together or don't work well together, so that there's not any one group with extreme ownership over any of them. And so that's really been beneficial in our staff going through that process with the others with incentives to be able to figure out how we can move the community objectives forward in a way that makes sense and is useful. The first incentive policy, the set aside policy, wasn't utilized because people didn't want to. It wasn't a functional planning document. It didn't mesh with the other documents surrounding it. And it was it was the first in the state. It was put together with, we think this might work. And over time discovered that it didn't. So as we've gone through the revisions, it's been used more and more. And we are hopeful, I'm gonna say more than hopeful. We are confident that the next iterations coming forward based on a full code analysis and input from staff at multiple levels, as well as community members, will be in a better position, especially with the ability to respond in a more expedient fashion to market changes in both financing, real estate, land development. Legislature just put a bunch of new things out, and we're working to figure out how to comply with things. Like, I don't know how we're gonna do that, but we're gonna do it. So that's the piece of the history behind that, and we're getting better with every iteration. Knock on wood, or plastic. The floor is wet, all horse bang it, there we go.
next slide. So yeah, really just delving into talking about the incentive policy a lot leading in. So I'm gonna jump in a couple slides here. This just is again, kind of really basic graphic of how our incentive policy has two components. Okay, so we talk about code, regulatory incentives, density bonus, and we call that a regulatory tool because it has to do with city codes and development standards. All of those incentives are found in the zoning code. The policy tool, we call it, in the incentive policy for affordable housing itself, the IPA, it gives us the authority to offer financial incentives to developers who are providing eligible affordable. So it's, I think there's a lot of different ways for these, a little different places where these financial incentives live, or ours is in the policy document. Go ahead, you can go to the next. I'm gonna continue with these two halves of this.
Yeah, that's not, we have this. We're gonna pause,
Oh, we don't have. Okay.
but I think he's coughing, so it's great, but we're gonna pause for a minute. For those online, we just lost quorum for a short amount of time.
So are there any comments?
We can't do that.
We can't. I don't hear.
Oh, no, we don't have, after the sound check, there was nothing else. And go.
Okay. Okay, so this slide here, we have, I'm just kind of elaborating more on what these incentives are, what the differences are between the two that we have available. Financial incentives, this is dependent, the money we have available for developers is really dependent on funding allocated on an annual basis through the budget process. That's our typical pattern. That means that is general fund dollars that have been used to fund this incentive policy account has always since we've had the IFA. So typically we do request funding during the annual budget process. There is no guarantee that we will get the funding that we request. That is all just a part of the whole budget process. They have to balance what are other needs, market conditions at the time, what can the city afford to allocate into this fund each year. We never really know. We just kind of do an assessment of what we have going on at the time when we make our request. So yeah, I do want to say, we have seen in the last couple of years, we've seen council make significant investments into this account. I mean, I think
The biggest we've ever seen.
the biggest we've ever seen, and it's just been crazy the last couple of years. So we're really trying to respond to what's going on. And I do want to mention we can also use in lieu funds paid by developers who have opted out of constructing actual affordable units for us. So we have the ability to accept a fee in lieu payment, or financial contribution from developers. And we have been able to use that money to fund this incentive policy. So that's been kind of helpful too, and then has to kind of pad the account. But yeah, the financial incentives that are described or permitted, kind of outlined in the IFA, they really just, we're trying to assist with the cost of various fees and permits that are charged to developers in the development process. So things like site plan fees, building plan review, and the permits, the associated development fees, each building permit, public improvement permits, engineering plan review. So we have, the IFA literally has a table of eligible fees that we're able to cover the cost of. I do want to make sure to say that in the state of Arizona, there are mandates that we must charge impact fees to developers. There are certain fees, we cannot waive them. We can't just say, oh, because you're giving us affordable, you don't have to pay that. They are required to be paid or collected. So oftentimes we're able to just pay on behalf of developers. We currently, you hear the term waive, fees are waived. We currently don't practice that at the city. We make the accounts whole, we pay on behalf of developers so that the city is always receiving some funds for whatever that permit cost was or whatever that review fee was.
There was a point in time where we were utilizing fee waivers. It got messy and there were some court rulings that changed what we are able and not able to do. And so we received guidance from legal that we now need to, we always paid the impact fees on behalf of, but other internal fees, sometimes they were waived. And then case law changed and we're no longer able to do that. So it's kind of money out of the right-hand pocket into the left-hand pocket. I did in the past pursue the, one, if we cut it from one pocket to the other and then we slid it back across so that fund always stayed whole. I haven't gotten traction with that because those fees do support the department and the work that they do relative to that development. I tried, you know.
I will switch over to the zoning incentives half of this slide. These are also called regulatory incentives. This really is just a developer getting some relief from the various development standards that can add to the cost of development. Things like if you provide the required affordable housing, then you get reductions in parking, reductions in the resource protection requirement. You get density bonuses, landscape reductions, and other small adjustments to building standards, things like setbacks. And so, yeah, you're really trying to be very flexible in that part of our zoning code to assist affordable housing developers with because all sites are kind of different. You're really constrained on setbacks. You can get that relief, or if you just have, we've seen Elara is a really good example of a development that offered affordable units, and they had parking. There was a huge lot, and they wanted it all, so they weren't really interested in the parking reduction. Just to clarify, the zoning incentives do not involve a financial transaction, so there's no dollars changing hands, or it doesn't cost the city money, literal money, to offer these kinds of incentives. So in that sense, they're a lot easier to apply than if they are used more routinely, because it's not dependent on money. So we can go to the next one. I just wanted to confirm what the IPA requires out of affordable housing units. So the minimum affordability standards, we call them, there are 3. There's a minimum contribution requirement of 10% affordable units out of the entire development must be set aside as affordable to be eligible to receive these incentives. A developer can always choose a greater percentage of their project to be affordable. And with that, they are eligible for more generous incentives. So that's another kind of, without getting too far into the weeds with our incentive policy, it's sort of like a sliding scale of the lower the AMI, the more affordable housing provided, the greater the incentive, the greater the value of the incentive is to you as a developer. So that's a pretty helpful concept, so that when we do see like developers who are building us 100% affordable projects, we can reward them or give them these incentives that are more valuable. And the next is maximum income limits. We have requirements for both ownership and rental. The limit goes up to 150% of AMI for ownership units, and up to 100% AMI for rental units. But it was designed to be flexible. We wanted it to be flexible enough so that there were caps on household income to qualify for an affordable unit, but we wanted the policy flexible enough so that we could be responding to the market and income changes as they happen, to ensure the developer use of the IPA was resulting in housing costs or the affordable housing units that the market was not meeting. So if the market is meeting, let's just say an ownership home for sale is technically affordable under current market conditions to 125% AMI, we want to be targeting, of course, less than 125 AMI on those affordable ownership units. I wanted to say This here, again, this is how these AMI limits have presented challenges, specific with our zoning code, specifically on the affordable homeownership units. The income limits identified in the zoning code are more restrictive than the limits identified in the policy. So the policy goes up to 150 in the zoning code. The home ownership limit in order to be eligible for zoning code incentives is 100% AMI. So there's a big difference there that ended up in the zoning code. And this is something we want to streamline with the revised incentive policy. So yeah, we're just we're making an agreement with the developer to enter into an agreement where they're bringing units that are supposed to be affordable to 100% AMI. And 3 years later, when costs and materials have gone up so high that the price that they're able or willing to sell that unit for, it exceeds the purchasing power, 100% AMI, we're stuck. And if they received incentives for that unit, it just complicates things. So anyway, I'll move on. I don't want to get too into the weeds with all that, but I'll move on to the last requirement we have is for permanent affordability. The IPA, it only allows for it allows for permanent affordability only. It was very important to council at the time of creation, and of course that continues to be an extremely important goal for our community to have permanently affordable units being created. So for ownership properties, that's a 99-year restriction, and for rental properties, that's a 30-year restriction, which is consistent with the federal low-income housing tax credit program, the 30-year term. So, and the incentives in the zoning code pose a challenge again, because they do include, the code offered a category for one-time affordability, which is great for flexibility for developers. But it conflicts with our IFA policy of permanent affordability. So again, that's where streamlining our policies. I have one last slide before I hand it off to Marissa.
And there was a hand up
Okay.
by Commissioner Tyler.
Do we want to?
Just muted.
Sorry about that. I raised my hand but put it back down. I was going to let her finish out the slides before asking the question.
Okay. I'll just do this last slide and then I'll be done and we can. All right. So yes, we were curious. I can't say I've been tracking this specifically, but we wanted to assess how much money we have spent specifically on home ownership units, affordable home ownership units. And that dollar amount is just under $178,000. And that's that's a 10-year time frame, starting with 2014. And this is under, of course, the IPA policy, not any other incentive policy. I believe that first one was the Eldon Townhome that Dave Carpenter built, post construction right there on Butler and Eldon. He had one land trust unit there. So that was our first ownership unit that we spent. So I did some math and I was able to add up all of these expenses for the homeownership units, and it resulted in about this 178,000 resulted in the creation of about 13 permanently affordable homes so far. So I did some math, that's a subsidy of just under $14,000 per ownership unit, which sounds pretty good. So thank goodness for our partners. I would say that a majority of those homeownership units in the past have been our smaller nonprofits delivering those units. We did, and I didn't leave out the total amount of money we've spent over time is about $714,000 in total spent on all development projects, both homeownership and rental, starting about 2013 till now. So, yeah, like I said, historically we had been given you know, we had been given chunks of money at a time as it was affordable to, you know, the city's general fund. Historically, a lot of those allocations looked, they were about $100,000 to $150,000 each year. So we could help, like I said, we could help these smaller projects pretty easily with those chunks of money. We could do really good work with that, but when we're seeing much larger multifamily projects, 200-unit multifamily coming in, to assist those developers in a significant way, you need much more. So we have been very fortunate in the last year and a half or so. We've amassed, I will use the word, over $1.5 million in funding that we're going to have available as of this next fiscal year, which starts on Monday. So that's really exciting. And I think what's also even more exciting than just having that much money at our disposal is having it reserved for developers who do have plans, who do have projects in the works, and we will realize those units with their help in the next year or two. So we hope to spend all that money down, frankly. And I just wanted to name a couple in case you were wondering. But yeah, a majority of all that money had been reserved for projects like Sierra on 66, also known as Woody Mountain Apartments. That's Roar's building it. That's a high-tech project, 100% affordable. Housing Solutions just got ground lease approval for the Isabel Street Apartments. We intend to assist as much as possible in all those fees and permit costs that we'll figure those dollar amounts out as we go. And the other project that we have money set aside for is Timber Sky Loft Starter Homes, the Habitat for Humanity's building.
So while there is 1.5 million, the bulk of it is already committed to projects that have turned in their reservation letters. They're decently into the development process.
And that is all I had. I didn't know if we wanted to do questions on this topic before Marissa does hers.
Let's go to results, which will then give the whole picture, and then we can do questions if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds fine. Thank you.
All right.
So after Jen is able to create agreements with the developers that yield affordable homes, I help move the process forward with the sale of those homes. Next slide, please. So this is the whole process from developer discussions all the way through a new eligible home buyer actually moving into their home. So Jen covered the development process that yields affordable homes. And then year round, our partner Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona promotes the city's programs, accepts applications, and verifies home buyer eligibility. At the same time that a home buyer is applying for our affordable home ownership program, they can also apply for down payment assistance programs just to maximize that benefit as needed. And then once Housing Solutions determines a buyer is eligible, they send the files my way and I reach out to the buyer. I have them watch a mandatory orientation video that really goes into the ins and outs of the program and kind of see if they have any questions or need any support. After that orientation, the eligible buyer can begin contacting properties that have new affordable homes for sale to learn more about the developments. And then if they decide to buy a new home, they can sign a purchase contract. And then once that purchase contract is signed, Housing Solutions and the city prepare for the sale. So while the home is being built, Housing Solutions keeps the home buyer's information up to date through the end of the escrow period. They provide housing counseling services and they ensure the final cost of the home remains affordable. And then I coordinate with the title agency and lender to ensure all closing documents are ready and drafted and signed, ready for closing. And once the home is built, Housing Solutions will pay for down payment assistance if that's being used, and we reimburse them later. They complete the home buyer's file and deliver it to us for retention and management. And then the city becomes the go-to entity for that homeowner's concerns, questions, and compliance. Next slide, please. So in order to preserve the affordability, once the city obtains affordable units, they're added to one of two programs under the Affordable Homeownership Program. It could be added to the Community Land Trust Program where the homeowner owns the improvements or the home and the city owns the land underneath the home. The land transfers to the city at closing at the same time that the home is transferred to the homeowner. And then a ground lease between the city and the homeowner is what's used to preserve affordability. This is a 99-year renewable contract between the homeowner and the city, and then that's released and re-recorded for each homeowner. These also have a monthly ground lease fee of $30 to $50, kind of depending on if they have a shared driveway, and the city will provide snow plowing. And then the homeowner is unable to mortgage the land in this agreement. Alternatively, it could become a deed restricted property. Deed restricted homes are typically condos that don't have land attached to them. If there is land underneath the home that is deed restricted, the homeowner does own that land. And so the deed restriction in this case is what maintains that affordability, and it remains in effect from one owner to the next. And there's no monthly fee for this kind of agreement. Both of these agreements have lots of legal stipulations we'll get into here in a second, but they also stipulate resale restrictions and allow for family members to inherit the unit. Next slide, please. Some of our other legal provisions outlined in the deed restriction and ground lease are outlined as follows. So the city has the right of first refusal at resale. This means we have the right to buy the home from the homeowner when they're ready to sell. The city facilitates refinance transactions and resales. So refinancing the property is allowed, but it needs to help the homeowner situation. So for example, it provides a lower rate, lesser payment, etc. And cash out refinancing, we'll get into this as well, but the equity that the homeowner is able to access is limited to 25%. And then the city also reviews substantial construction and alteration requests that could affect future affordability of the home. The homeowner must owner occupy the home as a primary residence. So we do make sure that they're doing this. We send out owner occupancy verifications every other year. And homeowners in the program must verify that they're still living in the property. Not owner occupying the property triggers resale requirements, so the home can be used by someone who does need it. The homeowner must follow the law, maintain the property. They're responsible for paying their own property taxes and ground lease fee. They must abide by the resale process. They must sell to another eligible home buyer. But it does say that they can have inheritors, so they can have children or family members inherit the unit. Next slide, please. Some other things to note, especially in this market that are beyond the city's control that affect the affordability and feasibility of the Affordable Homeownership Program. So we do like to caution home buyers for our new build units to limit their upgrades to their affordability. Like a 300,000 base affordable home with all the upgrades can really get out of control pretty easily. Also, unfortunately, we cannot control interest rates. We wish we could. These can either go up or down during the construction period, and a lot of these homes do take quite a while to construct. So we do try to make sure they're aware that those rates can change. And then many of you already know about the insurability issues happening in Flagstaff. So if the insurance of the home is too expensive, that can really affect the affordability of the home. Next slide, please. So once the homeowner is ready to sell, we order an appraisal and calculate their maximum resale price. We use an appraisal-based resale formula that uses past and current appraisals to arrive at a resale price for the home. We really like this formula because it is tied to market rate conditions. So as other homes increase in value, so does the homeowner's home. It incentivizes the homeowner to maintain the home. And it gives homeowners a fair return on their investment while keeping the resale price affordable for the next buyers. So as I was saying, the equity is capped at 25%. So on this slide near the bottom, you'll see the equation that we use to calculate this. So essentially we take the second appraisal, so the appraisal we order when they're ready to sell, and we subtract the initial appraisal from when we purchased the home. So that's the full equity. We multiply that by 0.25 to get 25% of the equity. And then we add that to their previous purchase price to get their maximum resale value. While the homeowner is only allowed to access 25% of the equity, to be really clear, the city is not getting a check for 75%. That stays in the home. That's what makes it affordable for the next. Next slide. Lastly, we wanted to highlight the number of permanently affordable ownership units we've been able to secure with this program. So this chart shows the units that have been committed over the years by each developer, the units sold to eligible buyers, and the remaining units to be built. We've had a total of 90 units committed, 61 units built and sold, and there are 18 units remaining. We've also had 25 resales over the life of this program. I think we're ready for questions now.
I wanted to add to the resale formula if I can. The one thing that also impacts what the homeowner walks away with is anything they put towards their down payment and any principal that they have paid off as well is fully theirs. It's only the equity accrued via market accumulation over the time of purchase. So we don't typically ask to share unless they partaken in another program where there would be a small proportional share, but typically they walk away with everything towards their principal. Everything they pay toward their principal as well as their down payment.
All righty. Thank you so much to Marissa and Jennifer for their presentation. I'm wondering if there's any questions from commissioners at this time. And I can't see the room. Well, I sort of saw someone raise their hand. So perhaps there's someone in there who wants to ask a question.
Yes, Eric Brownfield. You might have said, okay, you might have said this already, but who sets the 10% limit of the affordable housing?
I think that was decided by council in the original policy document.
And why has that not been brought up to make it more? Or can it be brought up to require more?
It could change.
Okay.
It could. It's like a national, it's very typical.
So it's based on national.
It's an industry standard. In recent years, we've actually exceeded it quite often.
Okay.
We're receiving, the community is receiving more than 10%. If we look at the number of units in the pipeline for development and the number committed, I would say we're up around 18%. But we needed to establish some type of minimum. A lot of inclusionary zoning policies, while illegal here in Arizona, are based around a 10% piece. In the zoning code.
That governs that.
In the zoning code, correct me if I'm wrong, 'cause it's been a while since I've looked at it, but if you increase your percentage and increase the depth of your affordability, then you are entitled to more incentives. In that piece, we work to create a menu because every development site is unique. And so we didn't want to say, well, if you do this, then you get parking, or you do this. So we say, if you hit this AMI with this percentage, you can pick 2. If you hit this, then you can pick 3, that type of thing. So that developers were able to tailor it more to what they needed for their site. Not everybody needs to be able to double count tree resources and slopes. So that didn't make sense for us to try to be like, well, you can have this. So I will be interested to see what the recommendations are coming out of the code and elements project as far as more. But I think we've always worked to balance development, providing things that the community needs, at the same time recognizing that providing those items in a capitalistic economic model means that money's coming from somewhere. And so to make it viable, to make it something where developers are like, yeah, I can make that work, versus setting it at a higher number where they just automatically hold us at arm's length with no progress, has been an interesting
Juggle.
It's, yeah, it's a juggle.
And I can think of two apartment complexes that have gone the way of 20% affordable to get the advantage of those higher, more generous incentives. One is approved and almost constructed, it's Aura Apartments down on High Country. It's
Like retreating.
off Country Estates. Yeah, down there, they're almost done. They did 20% affordable. That was very generous.
Yeah, my
And
house is super.
Sweet.
I
oh,
just really didn't do it. That's cool.
yeah, yeah, it was great. And then there's another development in the works, not approved much earlier, earlier in the process. And for now, they've said they're interested in doing 20% affordable.
Very good.
Yeah, so we just gotta keep moving.
Yeah.
But,
And then, of course, I'm nonprofit partners where the LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit developers are building at 100% affordability. We have one low-income housing tax credit in town that has 2 market rates, like 8 or 9 market rate out of like 80. So that's 90% affordable with 10% market rate to help that project pencil a little better with ongoing income. Even when, so inclusionary zoning wasn't always illegal in Arizona, the state statutes were actually silent on it. It didn't say we could, it didn't say we couldn't. And because our resources up here have been so limited over time, we went down the road of incentives long before that was a discussion with the legislature. You can find research regarding inclusionary zoning in both directions, saying it works. Look what we have, and others saying it works, but look how much we have to charge other folks in order to make it work. We have had a fair amount of success with incentives versus a requirement, and it changes that conversation with the development community as well. And so even if we could, I don't know if we as staff in current conditions or within the last 10 years, we would even recommend we go in that direction. It sets up, well, the positives of it are that it's more predictable. The developer knows I gotta do this amount of percentage and they start building it from day one. The other piece behind that, the negatives that come with it are, well, in order to do that, I'm gonna have to charge X, Y, and Z, or my contributions in other areas of the community are perhaps decreased. Affordable housing is always last, but it is something where we see developers needing to meet traffic study requirements and water and sewer siting requirements and things that they have to do. And there have been 2 developments I can think of off the top of my head that we negotiated with. We had a commitment, in one was money, the other was money and unit. And on the money and units ones, they walked into the room and said, there was community outcry about they're not being enough parking. And lots of community input on this is gonna be a disaster and it's gotta have more parking, et cetera. They met with other planning folks, et cetera, to try to figure out how they might meet community demand, et cetera. Well, to answer the community outcry to provide more parking, the affordable housing contribution. And so it's not always a given, it's that balancing needs. I will say, having worked almost at 24 years. So we've been through several iterations of pieces of, we used to come into the game under different direction of community development in years past, where we were like the afterthought. Oh, by the way, you need to chat with housing staff. And we worked and educated and worked and pestered that we're first. We're not first, but we are involved from the initial discussions forward. It's nothing more than what Jen talked about of educating folks about community needs, mentioning incentives if they're not familiar with them, to see that at this point in the development process, not here where folks thought it was an extraneous, like, well, I already said yes to all of this and now you want more. So we worked with planning and development services to reorder that type of thing so that it was the yeses are easier when folks have time to plan for it and build it into performance, et cetera. Yeses are not always there. And we are stuck in a position of not saying, so how are you achieving the 10%? But rather, these are the community needs, and, you know, we'd be interested in discussing how you may be able to contribute towards the community goal of affordable housing at a certain percentage. So we have to be very carefully legally because it is not a requirement. And if someone says no, with bulldogs, they don't stop. I mean, they're not like grabbing on the leg and shaking, but rather every single time comments are provided back of, let us know if you're interested, or can we talk it through? Timber Sky originally had absolutely no affordable housing commitment in any way, shape, or form, and said, what we're building is going to be affordable to the workforce in Flagstaff. It's workforce housing. That's what we're doing. And Justina was, I think the word relentless is not overstating it, being like, hey, so we have these community needs and we're wondering, and over time that conversation developed to where there was an affordability commitment. And it wasn't a holding anybody's feet over the barrel. It wasn't any of those types of things. Depending on the city council we have, we've had city councils in the past that will not ask the question, how are you contributing to the affordable housing needs in our community? It's just a completely silent thing. Sometimes we have a city council that will ask the question, how are you choosing to contribute towards meeting other community needs? And we do see a dynamic change with the change of city council members, whether there are council members that will ask that question or not. When they ask the question, our jobs are a little bit easier, but we still treat our interactions with the developers the same across the board. And we don't say, well, you know, we're going to have to tell city council that you said no. It does go into the report written by planning staff, but not as a negative call out. It goes in with other items of traffic, water, sewer, affordable housing, that type of thing. So it's not meant to be a punitive piece in any way. It's a careful line that we have to walk. I was disheartened when the state law came out that says we cannot. However, when it was first introduced, it actually prohibited us from incentivizing even. It was like we cannot even have conversations about who housing units might serve or at what price points they might be sold. And so through some amendments and through some education, and this is part of where the Arizona Housing Alliance was born out of, was to have a voice and say, okay, we get it, the geological cost is required, that's fine, but if we incentivize and a developer voluntarily says, yes, I will use incentives and this is what I will provide. And every time a bill has been introduced to remove the statute that says we can't require, a partner bill is introduced that takes it all the way back to you can't even have incentives. And so then it's this kind of horse trading situation. We haven't seen that for a number of years. I think because both sides went, okay, let's just leave alone. And that's where you see the zoning efforts and the regulatory, the removals of more local control surrounding regulatory items around housing construction come into play. And that's what we're seeing come out of the legislature. We're now required to provide additional annual information based on the number of housing units provided, committed, built, et cetera, across the board, not just homeownership as well. So we have a number of new state, largely unfunded mandates that we have until January 1 to put into place, which gives us right around 6 months of time to figure out some pretty big pieces. Thank heavens we partner with an amazing planning and legal staff that takes care of the bulk of that and lets us be housing nerds and lets them handle the planning pieces where their genius really is. So I hope that helps a little bit of like why 10% and what. Arizona is a different animal. We'll go to national conferences and it'd be great conversations, and then somebody would be like, oh, where are you from? And we say Arizona, and they apologize to us. Where they're like, oh, sorry. your tools are really limited, like it's known in the housing professional community that our tools are very different. We don't have access to not only inclusionary zoning, but TIF financing, that type of thing, where Arizona is a whole different animal, which has forced us to be creative, has forced us to look at things a little differently. And that's where we get calls from others being like, so would you share your incentive policy? Would you share X, Y, and Z? I think the incentive policy missed its mark in one particular way, and that is being limited only to permanent affordability. That's where council's mind was. Permanent affordability, I still fully support, but it's not for everybody. If you can afford to purchase a market-rate home, you should purchase a market-rate home. And it really put those, the financial piece of that purely into permanent affordability without giving credit where credit is due to other affordability mechanisms that may not preserve the investment in the same way, and ultimately leads to diminishing returns over time with the capital investment. But there's space for that. And I see recommendations coming forward, not having talked to folks about the cap analysis, but that other forms of affordability mechanisms need to be recognized and perhaps not incentivized as deeply as something providing permanent affordability. But there is value in one type of affordability.
Thanks, Sarah. Did you have any other questions? Commissioner Brownfield?
I had one more if I can. How much of that money, how much of that $1.5 million that you had accounted for already is going to go to down payment assistance? Because as Marissa said, there's going to be a process of if they do get the
Separate program,
separate.
separate budget line item.
Got it.
So that money is purely for.
Okay, so there's how much money is set aside for the down payment assistance of money there then?
$7 million.
How much?
In bond funds. 7 million.
7 million, but that's not available yet, right?
We're getting closer.
Okay, thank you.
We've sent things to bond counsel. Thank you, Jessica. Bond counsel needs to review the concepts and ideas. We've been talking legal. It's fun. We don't want to create community hopes and expectations around something we're later told is illegal and set up an adversarial situation, potentially adversarial situation between the Housing Commission and City Council, where we tell you guys one thing and then council gets legal advice that's different, that's not going to serve the community or the relationships. So we're anticipating that in September, August. Okay. Depending on how fast outside bond counsel and our internal legal can move, et cetera. So, and we were told by you, we were told by city council to be bold and to bring forward things that our community hasn't previously considered. So we have, which scares the attorneys, because they are things that are untested in Arizona, and they are things where people go, oh, well, I'm not sure that's going to work. We're not sure it's going to work either, but we can plan for it and mitigate as many of the things that we can participate or that we can anticipate. At the same time, we don't want to set ourselves up for a lawsuit that's going to tie that money up forever and ever. So that's the line we're walking in bringing that forward. And I do want to compliment staff on bringing bold things forward. Where you think, what? Oh, yes, but we found this program. They do it here. And this is how it works. Okay, well, let's go.
And then one more on behind, but those remaining affordable housing units in Crestview and there were a couple others. What is it going to take to move those? They've been sitting for a while, right?
So.
Yeah.
They're almost, we have sale this Friday. We have one under purchase contract, which leaves one last one, which there is a lot of interest in. So I'm expecting you'll solve. Hopefully.
Oh, sweet. So there's not going to be any left.
Not at Crestview. Yeah. One of our challenges, and I remember if you said, let's say if you did tell me to be quiet. One of the challenges in serving first-time home buyers with new construction is that you work with first time home buyers, they like to touch and see and feel and know what they're getting into. And partnering with developers and bringing brand new construction to market is awesome. It's scary for first time home buyers because they can't touch and see and feel, and they have to wait a number of months. The other danger with that waiting a number of months piece is income qualifications are typically good for 6 months. So if they're right on that border of income qualification because of the way the homes are priced and they get a raise and income limits haven't yet been adjusted, we've had people wash out at almost last minute, which is incredibly soul crushing. Way more for them, but also for us knowing the work and investment that's gone into it. And so sometimes we say, okay, well, income limits come out in April, so I need you to hang tight for like 3 months and then we'll chat again. I just said that like I have anything to do with that. I don't need to say. The people that work directly with home buyers do.
It's been wild. We've seen a wave of since the new year. It's like everybody just, I mean, I know it's kind of seasonal, like whether it's just a wave of interest in people applying for the program.
Doesn't here especially.
Yes, thank you, Housing Solutions, Angela Coder. Devon.
I just wanted to say the other challenge with new build is that developers want to get buyers under contract before they start construction and interest rates aren't locked. So more so even than the income limit changing, it's that rates change daily. So affordability is impacted and buyers don't just want to touch things. They want certainty that they can afford it when the house is done. So that's where we run into a pickle. I will tell you, I believe the last Crestview unit is getting under contract momentarily, and there's another Woodshire one that's getting under contract as well.
Thank you.
I was just gonna come, I think there's only one left in Wiltshire.
Only one left in the chart.
It's just like moving so quickly.
That made my head bend, made its way to us. The other thing I want to point out on the slide is the number of resales. When we first started down the road of permanent affordability, there was lots of folks who said, this is not going to work. Nobody's going to buy into this. Why would anybody do it? It is not going to work. And if it does for the first buyer, it's not going to work for the subsequent buyers. Nobody's going to do this. And we said, okay, we see it working in other places. We would like to try it. It is working. 25 resales is not a number to sneeze at necessarily. Where the homes are reselling either under a deed restriction or being transferred to the land trust model at that point of resale. It took time because people don't, first time home buyers especially, don't sell right away. But as you can see, the foreclosure rate is incredibly low. Part of that is due to our partners and the education that we require. The 3 that we have lost to foreclosure out of this were largely a result of the Great Recession. And the mechanism within that development was a deed restriction called Exhibit K. Those are dirty words to housing staff. It was written as a trial document. It was the first permanent affordability in the state. And as the Great Recession started to happen, lending standards went from, can you fog this mirror? Awesome. To, we will only finance vanilla ice cream in a dish. It can't be in a cone. There can't be any sprinkles. It has to look exactly like this. And that deed restriction was difficult to amend based on a number of factors surrounding how it was written and what its intent was. We have finally been successful in amending that and converting those units from something we know has challenges into the land trust model where financing has been available. And so we hate to lose any to foreclosure. However, given the fact that we were exiting the Great Recession with 3, was not a horrible thing. And that's not only permanent affordability, but the one-time affordable units built before that as well. And in fact, we had one that was at risk, and it was a divorce situation with some really nasty circumstances. And Marissa and Karen bent over backwards to rescue that out of foreclosure. And Housing Solutions, because Housing Solutions had identified the buyer. It was a team effort. It took
countless hours. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. We did not lose it to foreclosure, and it was sold to another eligible home buyer even this year.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
from start to finish.
Yeah, 2 weeks. It was insane. But they pulled it off, and that's a testament to the knowledge that our partners and our staff possess, as well as the willingness to do something a little unconventional at times, completely legal, let's be clear. But with that time and dedication going towards it, so that we didn't lose another unit. So thank you. That was a momentous effort.
So question, so you're saying if it goes to foreclosure, you completely lose all affordability options with that property?
So originally, no. Originally, when we went down this road of permanent affordability, the restrictions survived foreclosure. And then we hit a spot where lenders said, absolutely not. We will not finance if restrictions survive foreclosure. And that was with deed restricted units, and that's what the Real Homes model was. And we didn't like it, but in order to get financing for resales or for the few that were left to be sold, we went to council and said, this is not ideal. It's not what any of us envisioned, but it's not working unless we do that. And so under the deed restriction model, the restrictions terminate at the point of foreclosure. This is one of the other beauties of land trust for permanent affordability. Again, not for everybody, but in the situation of a foreclosure in a land trust unit, which we have not experienced, knocking on the floor, is that we still own the land. And if that unit is not being utilized to provide community benefit, then we'll charge full market lease rates for the land. Not the nominal $30 or $50 a month that we charge if it's providing community benefit. So the ability to own the land underneath that unit helps us preserve long-term that unit staying affordable within the community, and if not affordable, providing funding in another way that we can utilize. So land trust, they don't typically terminate because the land is not mortgaged. So we do everything we can, working with partners, Housing Solutions, and our lender and realtor partners to avoid folks getting into foreclosure. The other piece of the land trust model is if folks aren't making their monthly payment, it's a red flag. Like if you're not making your monthly lease payment, it's an opportunity for a phone call to be made to say, hey, how's it going? It provides for earlier intervention if someone is getting into a sticky financial situation. We have been known to defer those fees. They're not forgiven, but they get deferred when someone's in a financial situation that isn't conducive to them paying those fees so that they can get back on their feet. They still owe the community the money, but there's a deferral attached to it. Those are rare, but we work to realize that people are humans and they're not always. We had a household that got transferred because of one of the spouses was transferred to another community for a job. And the other spouse wasn't working and things were tight and hard. So we do allow non-owner occupancy for the case of deployment, of course, or short-term situations. Someone needs to move back to Kansas 6-9 months a year and take care of an aging parent. We had a homeowner go on a medical mission on a ship. Yeah. You need to tell us where you're going and what you're doing and when you anticipate returning. And then in those cases, they are allowed to lease, but to cover the mortgage and be able to create a maintenance fund to take care of the house while they're away. And we have people come back and say, thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done because I couldn't own or occupy it, but I didn't want to fill my house to go take care of my mom. So we do work to recognize that people are human beings with circumstances that we don't want to be an impediment. We want to be a help. So. Staff's probably frustrated. I'm talking way more, John. We've covered so much territory today. I know Tyler had questions at one point.
I'm fine. I had a question about the timeline for remaining affordable, just because it was my understanding that one of the biggest sources of housing attainable to lower income brackets is market rate housing that's just older, because as housing ages, it naturally becomes affordable. And I was curious if you had any data on like around what time horizon market rate housing tends to become attainable to people in like that 100 to 120% AMI. I'm guessing you don't have that data on hand, so don't actually have to answer that here.
That's not typically the pattern we've seen in Flagstaff. When people are unable to move up the continuum because of the housing price escalation differential, we see people obtain home equity loans and invest in what used to be starter homes or what used to be older properties because they're unable to move up without a significant change in payment or change in circumstances that allows that payment. So there's that piece working with it. The other one is if they are declining in price, quite often they're not financeable or they're not passing the inspection levels, especially for anything receiving assistance. And so we'll see things on the market in price points that appear to be affordable, if you will, to folks in certain income ranges, but the financing is not there. Especially true with things like mobile homes, et cetera. So I do not have data that is anecdotal experience in working over the years and in discussions with Housing Solutions and our lender and realtor partners. I'd be curious.
The answer to that is very interesting. Thank you.
Or are there certain neighborhoods that stand out? I mean, locally here, where people are looking at as like the affordable neighborhood, if that even exists here anymore.
Some of them traders.
That's
Well, manufacturer.
Yeah, even though it's more expensive than a house that's out there.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions or comments for staff? I don't see any Cs or Qs. Nobody in the room there?
No.
Awesome. Thank you so much to staff for the information and answering the questions. I appreciate it. Then we will move on to item 8, which is informational items to and from commission members, staff, and future agenda item requests. Item 8A is an update from our Housing Authority liaison. So I think Moses is here if you want to give an update.
Hi, yes, thank you. We've actually, the Housing Authority's previous 2 meetings have been canceled because of lack of agenda items. So there's nothing new to report from the official agendas. Sarah, is there anything you'd like to talk about?
Thanks, Moses. There is a large agenda item coming that we're not ready to talk about publicly because it involves multiple partners, some at the federal level. Which is always the easiest.
Yeah, so I didn't want to bring it up myself.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. So we have a potential fairly significant change in one of our programs, depending on what HUD can do for us, et cetera. This is where the difference between the Housing Authority Board and the Commission will be stark, where the Commission will the Housing Authority Board will make the decision and recommendations to council, but we will inform the Housing Commission. And that's the functional difference between the two bodies. The Housing Authority Board is
the one to consult and make decisions and recommendations surrounding housing authority programs and units. But we will keep the Housing Commission informed as we go through that process, just like we inform the Housing Authority board of things going on here in the commission. And that's why when we created the Housing Commission, I said, we must have cross-pollination between the two, because we can't have them functioning separately, nor only being translated by staff. That's why we have those, the shared effort between the two. So we have
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Moses, and thanks staff for the information that something's coming down the road. We look forward to hearing. Item 8B then is update from housing commissioners or other informational items. Does each commissioner have something they want to share? If you're virtual and want to put a Q or a C in the chat to let me know, or if you're in the room.
We have no hands popping
All
up.
right. Okay, we'll move on to item 8C, which is update from housing staff. Do you guys want to take it away with any updates?
I have one, I can just jump in. It might not be news for a lot of people. Oh, okay, Christine, sorry. But really quick, I think a lot of the commissioners may have already been aware, but we last week, on June 18th council meeting, council approved a development agreement amendment to allow a developer to increase the AMI on the affordable units, affordable ownership units they are offering. They were stuck at that 100% AMI limit that was just not quite meeting the reduced the sales price they were offering of just like $368,000 was the sales price. So we agreed as staff to increase the AMI, or we agreed that it was a good recommendation to increase the AMI 125 if they kept the sales price at 368 for the remaining 4 buyers. There were a total of 5 affordable units there. So that was the highlight of that DA amendment. Super helpful assistance, I think, from Lori at Da Vinci Realty and Karen as well, right? You were too. I was not attending that council meeting. I was on vacation, so just thank you for covering for me.
Well, and that's resulted in those units now being under contract.
Mm-hmm. So that was a very good adjustment made to that development agreement. It took a while. We started working with that developer on those conversations, going back and forth on what amendment made the most sense. Last year, started that. So yeah, I like where it ended up, and at the end of the day, we're just happy to see the homes built and full, the important part. So and really quickly, also at that same meeting, council approved a ground lease for Housing Solutions in Northern Arizona to move forward for the pursuing funding for the construction of affordable rental units on city property. So we're calling it the Isabel Street Apartments. It's 11 units. They picked up a project that had failed a couple years ago. We're really excited about moving forward with that, but we needed a ground lease approved in place before we could start construction on them. So that was also approved at this meeting. But it was a positive. We're really excited with that council approval last week. That's it.
I'll jump in and go next if that's okay. So I think last month, Marissa, in my absence, gave an update about our CDBG 2024 annual action plan. We were able to get some really exciting projects funded for that annual action plan. It was submitted to HUD, and can you guys hear me okay? Okay. And they have started their process of reviewing it. I know that our local representative has approved it. So it's moving on down the line. And then we did just release a notice of funding availability for the last of our available ARPA funds. These funds, it's about $300,000 directed by City Council to go to aid for nonprofits that are providing victim services. So it's not necessarily a housing focus, but there is definitely a lot of overlap between our housing organizations and our organizations providing victim services to the community. So those applications are due back July 15th, and then we will hopefully be going to council with contracts after their break is over, late August or early September. And then that is the end of our ARPA funding. Sadly, we've done a lot of really amazing things with those funds. So what a blessing to have them, but they're also a lot of work. So we're okay with being done, ready to move forward. So that's all I have.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. Good updates. Any other staff members have something they want to share?
Well,
Oh, just Dina, is your hand raised?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to take the opportunity. I'm sorry if I jumped in ahead of someone. You guys got a little splotchy for me with reception. I wanted to take the opportunity just to let you know that a few weeks ago, about a week ago, Sarah and I had the opportunity to meet with Katie Hobbs when she was in town. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I'm
and-
sorry, Justina, the main meeting room mic is open and there's some side conversation that's leaking through, so it's garbling what you're saying.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Let me give it a minute. Okay, one more time. So about a week ago, a week and a half ago, I had the opportunity to, there was a meeting about, the intent of the meeting was for our and social service providers to get a conversation with her. The focus of it was mostly on gratitude for what the state has done, as well as some ideas that, we all as service providers had. Devonna was in attendance, Housing Solutions. There was also Catholic Charities, the county was there, Flagstaff Shelter Services, the state of Arizona Department of Housing was there. It was really great. The governor started with talking points, ended with just an update about the state budget, and it was really interesting. So the commission was well represented.
I guess I'll jump in next. First, I just want to put this out there for the commission that the City of Flagstaff Housing Authority Board is still missing one board member. They need a person to fill a vacancy. They don't have a whole lot of requirements besides, Sarah, living within city limits. So if you know of anybody that would be interested in serving on the Housing Authority Board, please send them our way. Feel free to share my contact information as well. And then I have a couple more. Some of us went to the U.S. Housing Community Development Conference and Expo in Dallas, Texas on the 30th and 31st of last month. So following this meeting, it was really interesting. They were moving along. There were various different panels. And they had over 650 attendees with 300 government and housing authorities there. Topics were all over the place and super great. There was private-public partnerships, sustainable building solutions, artificial intelligence, which is a hot topic right now, ARPA, CDBG, lots of great information that we definitely, it was very useful to hear with some of the other cities around the nation. And then last but not least, last Tuesday, staff went to city council to present to them the same 2024-2025 implementation plan presentation that you all received last month. That is an official final document that will kick in on Monday, July 1. We have 18 strategies, and I guess I'll take this opportunity to thank Justina for stepping in for me last month and presenting that information. Staff are now going to be working on the 18-month report to report on the work that we have done for the 18-month corresponding implementation plan. So that has been posted on our website. I think I send that to you guys pretty frequently, but I will share that with you again.
I see Councilmember House has her hand raised. Do you have a comment, Councilmember?
I do. Thank you. Thanks everyone for the participation today. It's been very interesting conversations. I just wanted to acknowledge also the presentation that was done to council this week with the implementation plan. It was a great presentation. Kudos to the housing team for presenting that, and to you all for the continued work and getting that program and the different funding models rolled out and implemented. It's making a bigger difference than I think we can fully see, because it's not all very quick progress, but it still is meaningful. Any change that we're making in the local housing market is important change. So thank you for being part of that. The other thing I just wanted to share with you all was that I had an opportunity last week to be part of a separate conversation with Governor Hobbs. She did a convening of local elected members of the Black community to ask about the unique situations being faced in those communities. And one of the big topics that came up was housing. So looking at how we can further partner with the governor's office and at a broader statewide level to ensure that the unique community needs are being met in terms of housing, but also to shore up resources for, sorry, I'm hearing that same background noise, and I can see nobody's talking in the room, so I don't know what is picking up either. Maybe there's some mic technological crossovers, but anyway, just seeing how we can ensure that both Northern Arizona has a unique voice in some of those conversations, and ensure that there's support across the state to meet those different housing needs. So the governor spoke a bit to plans to continue enforcing some of the funding opportunities coming from the state level, and hopefully we'll be able to connect and find ways for areas like Flagstaff to have better access to some of that and more of a voice in those statewide conversations. So thank you all, and thanks again for all the work that you're doing on this commission. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Councilmember House. I see that Sarah has a C up there, Ms. Starr, so if you want to go ahead.
It's weird you call me Mr. Thank you. I wanted to mention quite often cancel a July meeting with council being on break and people being on vacations. We're not going to make that determination right now, but Adriana will be sending out forum check again a little earlier this time because this is vacation season. And we typically end up either without a June or July council meeting, commission meeting. Good for summertime. But we do have large items coming forward in August and September, including the report on progress on the 10-year plan from the very first implementation plan. We talked about the piece that's coming forward with last cap, I believe in September, as well as the menu of options for the home buyer assistance program. So we are planning on those two meetings. We're not quite sure about July yet, so just a heads up on that one. And that's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. And then I see Adriana has a C as well. So if you want to go ahead.
Yes, I was reminded that we didn't even talk about the Habitat groundbreaking event that the governor also attended. It was a groundbreaking ceremony for the 40 units, 40 starter homes by Habitat on Timber Skyland. And there were all kinds of community leaders present. There were pictures posted all over the I like to say these days, World Wide Web. And it was a really unique and touching event to see that happening. And that's it for me for real this time.
We're gonna have a big, all of these items are gonna be covered in the newsletter in August too, so a lot of these things will be written about.
Lovely. Thank you, Adriana. And then does anyone else have any other comments or things they want to bring up? Kind of a last call from the commission or staff at all? All right, seeing none, it looks like we'll be done for the day. Thank you all for your participation and insight and thoughtfulness. I appreciate working with you, and I'm excited to adjourn at 2:48 p.m. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.